doing better as a result of social media presence.
If it doesn't do those three things, then it's on the chopping block.
It's a return on investment discussion.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Daily Dealer Live. I'm your host, Sam Dark, and thanks for choosing to be here on this Wednesday, March 11th. Today, we're diving into three conversations that are heating up across the industry right now. First up today, the broker versus dealer debate. Are brokers hurting the market and driving prices to the bottom? Or are they actually serving the customer in a way dealers aren't? We've got a broker joining us today who heard our last show on the subject a few weeks ago and said, hey, you guys got it completely wrong. So we're handing the mic over. We'll hear his perspective. Then we're looking at fresh service department data from CDK, what customers really think about service advisors, and where dealers may be leaving serious money on the table in fixed ops. And finally, up today, one dealer operator is going to explain why he cut a huge portion of his tech stack, fewer tools, fewer dashboards, and surprisingly better performance. Plus, he may challenge the notion that younger GMs equal more AI equals turning it over to tech. He may dispute that. A lot to unpack today. But first today, let's turn to automotive industry headlines. Leading today with a legal development that's adding to a growing pattern in auto retail, a California judge has allowed the California New Car Dealers Association's lawsuit against American Honda and Sony Honda Mobility to move forward, overruling the automaker's motion to dismiss. For some context here, CNCDA filed the case back in August, alleging the companies are violating California franchise law by planning to sell Afeela brand vehicles direct to consumers rather than through Honda and Acura dealerships. Sound familiar? Volkswagen, Scout. The court also ruled that Sony Honda's $200 reservation agreement represents a first step towards purchase. It's a meaningful finding for how these DTC cases get argued going forward. The CNCDA said it wants a resolution before vehicles reach customers later this year, and it's moving with urgency to get there. Staying in the VW universe, or the VW Scout universe, the German automaker reported a more than 50% drop in annual operating profit Tuesday, with Porsche taking an even harder hit. VW's 2025 operating profit came in at 8.9 billion euros. That's well below analyst expectations, driven by U.S. tariffs, currency headwinds, and a strategic reset at Porsche. Porsche's operating profit, meanwhile, sank 98% to just 90 million euros, with margins collapsing from 14.5% to 0.3% in a single year. VW is now targeting a 2026 margin of 4% to 5.5%, and plans to cut 50,000 jobs by the end of the decade. For dealers, the takeaway is that a financially pressured VW is likely to stay cautious on spending and brand investment, which could eventually shape model mix, incentives, and the pace of North American commitments. And as an aside, it's a fascinating development on the heels of Scout and its attempted launch into the U.S. marketplace as well. Moving over to a quick recall alert out of General Motors, GM is recalling just under 12,000 units of certain 25 and 26 Chevrolet Silverado 3500s and GMC Sierra 3500 trucks over a rear fuel pump issue that could cause the engine to stall. The fix is an engine control module update. It's available for free through a dealer visit or an over-the-air update. Owner notices go out April 20th, and drivers can check their VINs on the NHTSA website now. And by the way, I've got a recall number. I kid you not. I'm not going to read it, but if you want to track it, I am going to read it. N262544420. This is a CDG first. We're actually tracking the recall numbers. That's right. All right. And wrapping up, turning to the CDG buy-sell tracker. Cue the jingle.
CDGbuysell.com.
There we go. Ross Downing Auto Group made its first move into Alabama, closing on Encore Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram in Mobile back on January 12th. It's the fifth rooftop for the Louisiana-based group, which did over $500 million in revenue last year. CEO Ryan Downing told us the deal made geographic sense relative to their Louisiana stores, and the group has its sights set on Texas and the broader Southeast next. Also, in the buy-sell world, Generation Auto Group picked up 2 New Jersey stores from Nielsen Automotive Group, closing January 28th. Generation acquired Nielsen Nissan, say that 10 times fast, Nielsen Nissan and Nielsen Infinity of Denville, rebranding both under the Rockridge name. If it brings their New Jersey count to 3 stores. You can check out more of these buy-sell activities at the full tracker at cdgbuysell.com. We love our CDG buy-sell tracker jingle as well. Well, that's a wrap on today's industry headlines. And as you know, our social comments are already starting to light up in anticipation of our big topic today. We are streaming live across all CDG social media platforms. You can post your comments wherever you're watching today's show. We'll bring those comments live into the show. Several comments. Lift Lane YT, hey, let's go. Glad to be here. Brittany Minerva coming in with a heart smiley face. Our guest may know Brittany will ask. Lift Lane YT says Mike. So we welcome all the comments as we dive into our first topic today. Let's turn to Mike Minerva, General Manager, Partner of Capital Motor Cars. Mike, welcome to the show.
How you doing today? Thanks for having me on, Sam.
It's good to see you. Good to have you here. So before we dive into our topic, just tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you and what do you do?
So I've been in the car broker business for about 12 years now. I started when I was just finishing up college. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I started working in the insurance business and kind of was doing some brokering here or there. I was younger. I didn't really have a book of business or anything. And then here we are about 12 years later now.
All right. So you sent us a text after our show on broker v dealer, and you said, always anti-broker, never anything positive. Should have a real broker on one of your shows to set the record straight. It's not right to constantly drag us through the mud. It's not right to constantly drag us through the mud. So let's have at it. Let's have the conversation. Why do you think dealers are so hostile towards brokers here in March of 2026?
I think the reason why they're so hostile against brokers is they're maybe not dealing with the right brokers. And brokering always has kind of gotten a bad rap, especially when you venture out of the New York City metro area. When you mention you're a broker and you're calling a random dealer in the middle of America trying to get maybe a one-of-one car or some specialty car, half the time they laugh at you. And that's where brokering has become more popular around here. And it's kind of changed the way the business models have gone on with the dealers around here.
So you say, hey, there are different types of brokers. There are different people that are engaged in this business. Describe for our audience, because by the way, brokering is bigger on the East Coast. And then it varies as you spread across the United States, depending on laws, whether it's allowed, whether it's not allowed, and then what the marketplace looks like. Describe to us, what is brokering? What is this practice of brokering?
So brokering, as far as I'm concerned in the Northeast market, is you call a car broker, leasing company. They call them brokerages, leasing companies. Everyone kind of markets themselves a little differently. And you just tell the broker or leasing company what you want. So I call up, say, hey, I'm looking to get a GLE 350 Mercedes. I want it in white with a brown interior or white with red interior. The broker will then go to their channels of dealers, say, hey, I have a deal on this car. Client wants this car. What's my cost on it? And then work their deal from there. And then hopefully
and you work that deal direct with the consumer, right? So you basically negotiate back and forth on behalf of the consumer. So
traditionally how it works is a dealer, if we're working with a dealer, that's one of our normal dealers we're working with, not a dealer, a new dealer right off the rip. They'll give us our costs on the vehicle. So whatever our off MSRP percentages, they'll say, hey, you can do this on the car. These are the incentives. This is our doc fee. This is what it costs to do plates in New Jersey or New York, whatever state the deal is going to be at. And then from there, we build out our deal. Most of us all kind of use the same software. For a long time, we were all using a product from CDK. Now we're using a new product that just kind of dropped out the last couple months, actually probably a year and a half ago.
What was the CDK product called? And then what's the new product called?
CDK was the web desking program from years ago, the old.
Oh yeah. They
program.
sunsetted that, I think.
Yeah, they were supposedly phasing it out or redoing it. We still have access to it. We still use it for every now and then, but we use a new product. It's called Xdesk, actually. It was created by a broker for brokers, it's amazing how it streamlines the process for us.
So you take these data points, you enter it into the system,
Mhm.
you get the customer's information, credit bureau, all that stuff, and then you send that off to, let's say it's Nissan, you send it off to NEMAC, right? The deal
So
and get it
I'm not.
approved.
So brokers are not sending deals directly to the banks at all.
Okay.
They are. We take our deal in. So it'll start off with customer. We close the deal. We have our deal screen from Xdesk or whatever software a broker's using. We'll take that worksheet. We'll get the customer's credit application, whatever other trailing documents that come with the deal. If there's, proof of conquest, proof of loyalty, all that stuff, button it up all in one email and send it off to whatever dealer that the vehicle is going to be coming from. And then from there, a day or two later, the customer has the car at their house, especially if they
Okay.
live, in our general, in the New York, New Jersey area. Obviously, if we're shipping the car elsewhere, that lead time will add into that.
So give us your perspective. Why do you think, how do you make your money on this deal? So you get the cost from the dealer. You're giving your consumer a good deal, I would imagine. Do
Mhm.
you mark up between the price the dealer's willing to pay you and what you charge the customer, or is there a fee that you charge in between? Dan
So,
C asked that. He says, does Mike charge a fee to the consumer and also take a cut from the dealer? How does that work?
so every broker operates differently. Some brokers charge a flat fee, like your lease hacker broker. We had this conversation, like your lease hacker
Yeah.
brokers,
Yeah.
these new style of brokers out there that don't consider themselves brokers, but they're kind of like a car finder service. Um, they're charging you a flat fee. Our profit is worked into whatever the cost of the vehicle is. So as a
Okay.
broker, the goal is to try to work with dealers that are letting you buy cars as deep as possible. So whether it's behind invoice or at invoice, whatever the market is on that
Well,
particular vehicle, you want to buy it as deep as you possibly could.
so Mike, I think a lot of franchise dealers watching this would be curious to know, why does a consumer come to you instead of direct to the dealer? So if the consumer could negotiate just as good a deal with the dealer,
Mhm.
why do they come to Mike at Capital Motor Cars instead of to XYZ Nissan as an example?
So as we all know, dealers are all over the place, especially in the Northeast. We're
Yeah.
overloaded with every manufacturer in either
Yeah.
New Jersey, New York. We're overloaded with every manufacturer. So as a consumer, I say this all the time. If you truly want to get a better deal than what you're going to get from a leasing company, you're
Yeah.
going to spend 3-4 days driving to every one of these dealers. Hey, I got this offer. Hey, I got this offer. Hey, I got this offer. Versus calling a leasing company up, a brokerage up, and working a fair deal out where the car shows up at your house 2 days later. You're not wasting 3 days trying to find that one-off deal that
Got it.
you might have. You say you live in New Jersey, that you found at a Nissan dealer on Long Island.
Okay. So what you're saying is you're able to shop all the dealers
Mhm.
and really kind of work them against each other a little bit. You do what maybe the lead generating websites do and the free market does online. You just do it in one place, one person, right? So how do you respond to the dealer who says, look, and we heard a lot of this on our last show. Look, I'm required to spend millions of dollars on my facilities. I've got to worry about CSI. I've got to take care of that customer if there's a problem after the delivery. And you're coming in and you're pushing me on a program that causes me to lose a lot of money selling this vehicle. In fact, I don't know, it was quoted that some dealers will lose $5,000, $7,000 to sell through a broker if you package up 10 deals or 15 deals or 20 deals all together and you help a dealer hit stair step.
Mhm.
Um, what do you say about that? Like, they're required to have a facility and brand standards. You're not. You can go around, consolidate them and repackage them. Shouldn't you be required to have facility standards, maintain CSI, maintain a great customer relationship?
Yes, of course. And if you don't do those things for dealers, they'll cut you off. I've seen brokers get cut off from dealers all the time where, their customers maybe cause a problem on bad surveys. Um, there might have been a problem with the vehicle and you know how it is in the service department. They're causing
Yep.
a problem at service.
Yep.
Um, there's times where brokers do get cut off from dealers. I hear about it all the time. I see it all the time. And Those are things where you have to be a company that has a footing that can stand behind and make sure the whole deal is being taken care of. If there's a problem, you don't just throw it to the side and say, "Oh, it's the dealer's problem now." Technically, you sold the car. It's your problem as well.
So the dealer can hold you accountable, and then
We
that's
don't
their
pay.
leverage to make sure that the customer is well taken care of.
Of course. I mean, I'll give an example. CDJR stores, if they don't
Mhm.
get perfect surveys from our customers, they're not paying.
Yeah. How do you get the perfect survey, by the way? Let's give us your secret.
It's
Because
tough.
you're
I,
not the franchise dealer, right? And so you're not providing the experience and a lot of the questions that are asked on the survey.
so for my company, I can't speak for every leasing company and brokerage out there. My delivery team is required, no matter what the vehicle is, to go through the vehicle with the client. If there's an app, phone app for that vehicle, they're required to set up that phone app for the client with them on their phone, um, and continue the delivery process the same way a dealership would have their maybe their genius, like BMW calls it, their whatever the case may be, that goes over the vehicle with that client uh, at delivery.
So it's important to hold that line and keep that standard. You mentioned there are brokers that are different. Not every broker is the same.
Yes.
Should there be standards among brokers who are engaging this type of behavior activity? Because you get somebody that doesn't defend the line to the same extent you do on CSI or customer experience, and they just come in and offer a cheap price, but nothing on the other side. Ultimately, the dealership and then the OEM is held accountable to finalize that at a significant loss. Should there be better standards?
Of course. In New York, the state has really kind of clamped down on making brokers make sure they're licensed, insured, bonded. And I think that needs to be an industry standard practice. Unfortunately, it's a industry where the market to enter, the entry is virtually just an office and a cell phone and
Yeah.
some desking software. So there needs to be some sort of standards in the industry, whether it's from a state level or something that kind of keeps everybody to even playing field. If one brokerage is working out of their house with no overhead and no skin in the game, and I'm over here, I have an office, I have 15 people I got to make sure are paid every week, and CODs are paid to dealers, and money's going back and forth, and everything's being done. FedEx is going out, plates are getting sent out. There needs to be some sort of industry standard where people have to abide by.
Dan C comes into the comments and he asks a great question. He says, "Hey, just for clarity, Dan C, by the way, he's a longtime listener, posts often. Who actually sold the vehicle to the customer, the dealer or the broker?
So
Who is the
that's
seller?"
that's a great question. A lot of people always ask us this. The dealer that is facilitating the deal is the dealer that is selling the vehicle. So someone in the dealer is getting credit for the deal, whether it's a fleet manager or they have a round robin where they just throw the fleet deals around the showroom, and everybody gets credit for a deal for doing nothing essentially. Um, the dealer is selling the vehicle. There is nowhere on the paperwork or the contract for the lease or contract for the finance does it mention that ABC brokerage sold this vehicle.
Got it. But how does it make sense? How do you hold a broker accountable if it's not done well, if the brokerage is never listed on any of the paperwork? I,
How do you hold the brokerage
yeah,
accountable?
yeah. How would you hold the brokerage accountable if they are not the seller?
So the
Like
dealer the,
it's
deal- the dealer does, in a sense. They know who at the
they do. Got it.
they know in their system. Okay, all right, Mr. Jones is causing an issue with a survey or service. Okay, look, it's a broker deal. Oh, it was sold by
Yeah.
so and so.
So do brokers have a relationship with the OEMs like Nissan or Stellantis or Hyundai or lenders, captive lenders that traditional customers don't?
No, we're
Okay.
not directly dealing with manufacturers at all.
Okay.
We're dealing with directly with whatever dealers are willing to work with brokers at the time.
Yeah. Do you get the impression though that there's some OEMs that are more supportive of broker business than others and more
Yes.
helpful in it?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, some OEMs don't really understand what we do.
Yeah.
Um,
Who's
like
most supportive and who's most disruptive in that space, would you say?
Land Rover hates brokers,
Yeah.
and they
Okay.
know their cars are getting sold by brokers.
And
Yeah.
what do they do to stop it? Do they do things to stop it, or do
They'll
they?
pull allocations from the dealer if they find out that it's a broker deal.
Yeah. And then who are the top 2 or 3 that support it?
I would say BMW is a pretty big supporter of it. They're like really the only ones that kind of police it in a sense when you're putting an application and there is a section
Where you can declare
for
it.
the F&I, yep, for the F&I director to declare it. Mazda's doing the same thing now. They've
Uh-huh.
been doing that for a little bit now, I think almost 2 years, but BMW's been doing this for probably longer than I've been in this business. So
So why is it such a big business on the East Coast and in certain parts of the country, and then almost unheard of elsewhere? Why are there geographic differences in broker business? There are probably dealers today that are watching the show going, "What on earth are you all talking about?" Right?
I think it has to do with leasing. And when I say leasing, 90% of the business that brokers are doing are leases. I would say post COVID, the finances and the cash purchases have, there's been an uptick in that. Certain
Hmm.
vehicles just don't make sense to lease anymore. They make more sense to finance.
Hmm.
So I would say the reason why we exist is because of leasing. We were talking about this earlier. We were looking for, I forgot what kind of truck we were looking for. And I had to call some random Ford dealer. And I'm like, hey, we're going to do a lease on this. And they're like, we don't do leases.
Ah,
And I'm like, what do you mean you don't do leases? They're like, oh, we don't know how to do an out of state lease. In
yeah,
2026, I don't care if you have a very small dealership. You should know how to bill out a lease or structure out a lease for a client
yeah.
if they're looking to lease a vehicle. So I think the reason why we exist and why it's so big in the Northeast is because leasing is a major majority of the car sales here, no matter what the brand is.
And there are some dealers that just flat out won't do it. So the real issue is it brokers or is it dealer pricing transparency and willingness to transact certain types of transactions?
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of great comments coming from online. I just want to go to a couple of these. Um, uh, Frank Martin says you can get just as good a deal or better deal if you go do the work yourself. So pro dealer standpoint. Lift Lane YT says learning a lot from this live. Thank you. We see Frank Martin says dealerships are usually very responsive to customer demands. And then Motor City Mav says, I buy all my vehicles through Mike. He is the standard. Auto Find Leasing says Mike Minerva is a legend. We use CMC all the time. And then Vedran says, great info and explanation of how it all works. And then Robert actually comes in and says, I believe the future is calling for brokers. People don't want to spend 3 to 4 hours in a dealership. Do you think the type of experience being offered by franchise dealers in brick and mortar contributes to an exit from more traditional models to yours, a broker, or even more online, some of those other models?
For sure. And it's funny someone brings this up. Some dealers in this area specifically, if you mention you're working with a broker, it either goes one of two ways. Either they tell you, have a nice day, get out of my showroom, or they give the car away and they'll sell the car at pretty much what they're willing to sell us the car for. So now they're
Mhm.
taking a mini deal on the floor, or a short deal on the floor, just to keep that customer in house versus having them go back to the broker. And then maybe that deal ends up at a completely other dealership versus their dealership. And we've had instances before where I've had a customer shopping, going around, uh, looking for a Jeep Grand Cherokee, and I found the car. I send the deal, and it's like this guy spent 4 hours with one of my salesmen on Saturday. Like, I can't let you sell this car to them. Like,
Yeah.
and there's plenty of instances that happens.
Yeah.
And
So
that's not
there,
fair, and that's not fair to the salesperson either. And
no,
no disrespect to the salesperson. That's a reflection on maybe poor structure at their store and the way they're doing things. And holding a customer hostage for 4 hours is something that should take. It shouldn't take more than an hour to buy a car. I'm sorry.
yeah. So part of your marketing out there, you and brokers similar to you at Capital Motor Cars, you advertise leases, you advertise payments, you advertise online. What is your most successful lead generating activities in the broker world that brings clients and customers in that you deliver the experience you deliver?
Word of mouth. There's nothing.
Okay.
There is nothing better than word of mouth. You could spend $50,000 a month on Instagram, Facebook, Google Ads. There is nothing better than word of mouth. Getting someone in. It's a warm lead. They already heard the experience that their friend or family member had, and typically, if they're referring you, they had a great experience. There's nothing better than that. Working with other business owners and just word of mouth. Those are the two best ways to generate clients, and that's how I generate a good majority of my clients. Is word of mouth.
Coming from the comments, too fast for you all says many times there are language barriers, et cetera, or brokers play a massive role in keeping it all smooth. And then Dan C comes in and says, does Mike target specific ethnic groups and or religions? Mike.
I'll sell a car to anybody. It doesn't, I have no bearing on any of that stuff. That, there are the brokering world kind of did start from that realm. And now it's kind of moved away from that, where everybody's a broker. Every ethnic group has someone in the broker business representing that ethnic group.
Mike, if brokers disappeared tomorrow, would the consumer pay more for vehicles today?
Yeah. I think it takes away some of the competition that they have. There's dealers, if I'm doing deals for a customer in New Jersey, I'm getting the car from Long Island because they have better pricing. Now that customer has to now go from New Jersey to Long Island to potentially get that same deal versus trying to get the same deal from a local dealer that doesn't want to do it.
Here's what strikes me as super interesting. You bring up some great points: customer experience, speed to acquisition. You're delivering something that the consumer wants. So in a free market, you're definitely doing something that people want. I do think there needs to be controls. We talked about this outside the show.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you in a minute what rules should exist. But it also occurs to me that if there were no dealers that said, hey, I'm going to make all these Nissans available to you so I hit my bonus, or all these BMWs to you so I hit my bonus, it kind of dries up. You turn back into used cars. Fair? What do you think is the pull for dealers to continue supplying vehicles? Yet, on one side, they're saying, hey, this should go away. On the other side, they're selling you a lot of vehicles. They're creating a business. A shadow business.
The only way it would stop is if dealers said one day,
no,
pull the plug out. And until manufacturers take away stair steppers and all these things, it's never going to happen. Even during COVID, when there was no inventory, there was still plenty of dealers willing to work with us. And it honestly made us stronger, and it made us learn how to find cars elsewhere. I was pulling cars from all over the country, and I'm talking regular cars. I'm not saying like a Mercedes G-Wagon, where still to this day, you're going to have to go all over the place to find a vehicle like that readily available. We're pulling Jeeps from Iowa or a Mazda from Georgia just because that dealer had cars. They were willing to work with us. Their pricing was good, and they needed the deals.
Yeah. Kareem says 99% of the time customer would not get the same price. So that's an argument for pricing. And then Too Fast for You all says broker deals with all makes and models. Brokers don't have to sell a Nissan just because of the dealership they're in. Brokers have no bias. So what rules should exist for brokers? Should they go into the future? And then I'll ask our last question for today.
I think every brokerage should have whether it's a brick and mortar location, some type of office, brick and mortar location, should be some sort of DMV licensing behind it. Obviously insurance, you're driving people's vehicles around, bonded, in case something happens. Every dealers are bonded. You should be too. And kind of held to a standard. You're using, you have people's information. So you should be held to a standard of protecting their information. And you're also dealers' information as well. You're protecting the dealer's information and the customer's information.
How do that you bring up a super interesting question with all the FTC safeguards rules and NPI, non-public information and whatnot. How does a good broker think about data security, data protection when you've got, you're not the seller, but you are in the custody care control course of control of data and information. How does that work? Who has liability if there's a data breach or someone leaves a driver's license somewhere in process?
That's a good question. Kind of a little bit above my head with that one.
Yeah, that's okay. I was just, yeah,
You know, every brokerage is different. I mean, there's some brokers that fill their credit apps out on pen and paper still.
yeah,
So those brokers don't have to worry about that, but
yeah. Dan C asked the question, do brokers actually pull credit reports? I would assume you do. You've got to be able to pre-qualify and understand
so
a customer's capacity to buy a vehicle.
that's a great question. My office, we use 700 credit. Any deal that comes in, I'm checking the credit before I'm wasting my time sending it to a dealer. I want to see what's going on here. Hey, all right, customers looking for a Chevy Tahoe and they have a 650 credit score and they think they're going to get, approved on a lease. It's not going to happen. So I'm not going to sit here and send that deal to a dealer. Excuse me. Here and send that deal to a dealer and waste that dealer's time. Those are, like I said, there's different types of brokers. Every brokerage works differently. That's something we do here, just so that I don't have my sales guys running around working with somebody that's not a qualified buyer.
All right. So our last question up, are brokers the travel agents of the auto industry, or are brokers the Uber of car buying?
A little bit of both. I mean, a travel agency kind of in this day and age has been kind of phased out. I feel like depending on the type of, trip you're looking to do, it's really calling travel agent to book a trip at Disney, but you're looking to go some exotic trip that, you really need some help with. Yeah. You're going to hire a travel agent to do that.
Well,
so
Mike,
I say a little bit of both.
A little bit of both. All right. Mike Minerva, general manager, partner of Capital Motor. I got to tell you, thank you so much for coming on and kind of bringing greater transparency to this practice of brokering. Bold step, especially given all the feedback we got from our prior episode. Hopefully you felt like you were treated fairly on this show, and we appreciate you being as transparent as sharing this. And we do want to bring you back at the very end of today's show for a little lightning round with a dealer. We'll talk a little bit about brokering versus franchise at the very end of today's show. So hang out for a minute, Mike Minerva. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me on.
Fascinating perspective. Appreciate him answering. And my gosh, our entire social media is blowing up with comments. I wasn't able to bring them all in, but you can go look online, the various platforms, and see all the postings. But let's talk Experian Automotive for a moment. Today's episode is brought to you by Experian Automotive. Nearly 90% of dealers say fraud is rising, and 75% say it's already impacting operations. Stop it fast with Experian Automotive Fraud Protect. Quickly validate customer identities and documents with zero disruption to your sales flow or the customer journey. Learn more by clicking the link in the show notes below, or if you're watching the live show, you can scan the QR code off to the left. We appreciate Experian Automotive for supporting today's content, including that fascinating conversation we just had with Mike Minerva about brokering across the country, but in particular on the East Coast, managing partner Capital Motor Cars. Thank you again for supporting today's content, Experian Automotive. And let's head straight into our next conversation, talking all things fixed operations, service, and data. Senior Director of Product Marketing, Fixed Operations CDK, Kim Saylor. Kim, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks for having me.
It's interesting. We talk about brokering, and not everybody in the country knows it. Not everybody is touched by it, but a part of it, at least what I learned today, is created by some of the friction points in franchised automotive. One friction point you shared with me on a podcast you and I did is the average wait time if I call a service department before I get a response. Tell us, what is that wait time, and what does that tell us about automotive service departments and where we need to put some energy and focus in March of 2026?
Yeah, so the wait time on the latest study we did was over 9 minutes, the average hold time or wait time to get someone on the phone to schedule a service appointment. And that's up a little. It was over 8 minutes in the previous study. So, the dealers, and it surprised me that there are dealers that are still hesitant about, let's say utilizing a virtual assistant for scheduling appointments because they're worried, they're hesitant. I get it. They're worried that their customer's not going to like that experience. But if you're waiting 9 minutes, the experience is already bad. And that's the first, step into the dealership. That's a lead to your service department.
By the way, so if I understand that right, average 9 minutes, which
Mhm.
means for every 1 minute wait, there's an 18-minute wait, right? So,
That's
and
right.
it's astounding. I wouldn't wait on the phone for 9 minutes for anything, let alone to pay somebody to fix a car. What
Yeah.
do you make of that trend line getting worse in 2026, not getting better? Why is it getting worse, Kim?
You know, I don't know why it's getting worse. I think one of the things that's happening, at some stores, and I certainly don't want to, do a blanket statement, but there's a lot of dealers that aren't adapting to customer expectations. Even, if you think about doing communications with a customer, as a one size fits all based on, generation.
Yeah.
So, they're thinking about their customer that's, let's say, my age, that they're thinking, okay, this person doesn't want to have a virtual assistant, but yet 31%, the same study, 31% of all the customers said they prefer a virtual assistant. And when you look at the
Yeah.
younger generation, that,
It's
it just
higher.
goes up higher.
And in fact, they want to get fast from voice to text, right? Or some alternate form of communication. In some cases, they're okay going to a virtual assistant as quickly as they can, unless it becomes complicated, right?
Exactly. The younger generation, they don't want less communication. They want better communication. And in their mind, that is better communication for them.
Yeah. What does your data show about what are some of the biggest shifts happening in fixed ops right now that most dealers don't see yet from your perspective in the data?
You know, again, I think it's just not taking in those customer expectations, being, let's say, proactive on communicating with the customers, you know, not sending out alerts, having the customer still calling into the dealership to find out the status versus proactively reaching out to the customer.
Yeah. What does the data show about how customers actually think about service advisors today? Their role, what they rely on a service advisor for, and how should we be thinking about that role in winning in 2026?
Well, the service advisor is really the face of the service department. It's the window into the dealership, the service department for the consumer. And so, what did stand out is how consistently positive customers feel about their service advisor. So, almost 90% of the consumers said that their advisors do communicate clearly, they explain what's needed, they treat them with respect. So, that's really huge because if those things didn't happen, and when they didn't happen, the NPS dropped by almost 40 points. So the
Mm,
advisor experience really, can make or break how that customer feels about the dealership. And going back to that service shopper study, the number one reason customers chose to take their car to a dealership for service is because of the relationship that they have with that dealership. And the relationship is just built and reinforced by that service advisor.
Paul Salzman comes into the comments and makes a great point. He says, one example, some dealers don't allow booking loaner cars via their online scheduling system. So you must call to get a loaner. He says that's a frustrating friction point when it could be reasonably automated. And it's an interesting point Paul makes, Kim. If you automated that, that then frees up the service advisor to handle some of that more personal problem solving rather than just scheduling, which anybody could do. AI could do.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, the service advisors have a lot on their plate. And so anything that you can take off their plate that can be automated, communication, scheduling appointments, so that they're not answering calls, it allows them to provide the customer that's standing in front of them a better experience.
Did you, as part of your survey, did you look into the split on service revenue, like how service revenue breaks down between customer pay, warranty, and internal?
Um, we looked at recall information, but not so much just straight up customer pay warranty internal.
Okay. Okay. What came out in the data as it relates to recalls? We're definitely seeing a lot of recalls, in this post-COVID era with as supply constraints have evened out.
Yeah, so we talked about it, Sam, you and I talked about it before
Yes.
about
Yeah.
recalls and how you know recalls is an area or an opportunity for dealers to provide more education. There were a lot, especially the younger shoppers, when they didn't get a recall done, they weren't getting it done because they thought it was going to cost them money.
That's
So they
crazy
were
to me.
hesitant to
That's
do that.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did that show up? And you said it was what gen was it that was not
Gen
getting
Z.
service call?
Yeah,
Okay.
Gen Z. But the ones that did come in, the Gen Z that did come in and get that, that recall work completed, they were also very likely to add additional services. So it's not necessarily because they're just, carefree with their money. They were very careful about what they spent, but when they had that trust with the advisor and they understood what work was needed, they were likely to add additional service as well to that recall.
So what's the takeaway for a dealer on that? Is it to be better at outreach on recalls and make sure we explain, hey, these recalls don't cost you money. These things are paid for by the OEM, by the dealership, and they're part of your ownership experience.
Absolutely. This, you have to think about the Gen Zs. This is likely their first big purchase, right? And so, they don't know, you know, to me, the idea of a recall, it just seems obvious. It's going to be paid
Yeah.
by the OEM, but
Yeah.
I'm the age I am and I've had multiple
Yeah.
cars. This is their first big purchase. So yes, just educating them that it's not going to be money out of their pocket, by
Yeah.
getting that recall work done.
What does your data say about service customer retention in 2026?
Well, it's all the retention really, is going to be about how the dealership can provide the experience, build the trust, and it keeps those customers coming back, especially when we talk again, going to that younger shopper. They're very loyal. They
Yeah.
are, I think it was, over 90% likely to return to the dealership for service that they bought their car. So they're very loyal. And then
Yeah.
on top of that, if they're treated, the way they expect to be treated, which is basically, a good experience in building trust, then again, it was over 90% that they would come back to that dealership and buy that next car. So, again, I think we talked about the last time, it's a big opportunity for the dealers to make sure that they are providing the experience to those younger shoppers, that they're expecting, so that they come back to the dealership for service, and of course buying their car.
Was there any other findings in the data set that just surprised you as a takeaway for dealers here in 2026, Kim?
Well, I guess I wouldn't say surprising as much. It's not surprise. Let me just say what it is. So
Yeah.
over 4 out of 5 customers in the survey said that they were greeted at the car. So the surprise to me is that not everyone was greeted at the car. And I think it goes back to what we talked about, where, the advisors have a lot on their plate. And if there are, solutions, things that could be automated to take that off their plate, 5 out of 5 would be done. It's likely not happening when the dealer's getting busy and they're answering the phones, and maybe they are, making outbound calls to let the customer know about their vehicle instead of utilizing a tool that would do that automatically. And the main reason I bring that one up is because the customers that were not greeted at their car, the NPS dropped by more than 30 points. And
Wow.
that greeting is the first impression and really sets the tone for that entire service visit.
How do you define greeted at car, Kim? So they pull into the lane and they're greeted at the door. Are they greeted outside as they pull up? How do you define that?
Really, it was so that they were greeted and they didn't have to get out of their car and find a person. Someone came
Yeah.
up to them versus them walking over to a desk or wherever it might be to find someone to help them,
Well, I know
service.
what that poor service advisor is doing. They're waiting. They're trying to take care of those 6 phone calls at the 9-minute
Exactly.
wait per call. Like it really
Exactly.
does. We had a dealer that came on last week and said, "Hey, I've created a shirt and it's called 2020 Fixed." And he said, "In 2026, we are going to train our fixed ops teams like we've never trained before." And it really occurs to me, between the data on the 9-minute wait time to
Mhm.
your data about showing up, to Gen Z and their propensity to not understand recalls are paid by the OEM, and or their propensity to actually get additional work done once they're taken care of on the recalls. Like training and service is crucial in 2026, I would think. So
It really is. And, whenever you see car sales, get flat or go down, there's a focus on fixed ops, which for me, it's always a focus on fixed ops. So
Yeah.
there's training that could be involved. There's technology to help those advisors, all to really improve that experience for the customer. That's, going back to one of your first questions. I think one of the things that, dealers that are really successful have moved from, the advisors being, a salesperson to becoming, in the customer's eyes, that trusted advisor.
Yeah. Yeah. Which we attempted to do that with sales and variable a long time ago. And what is it about now in 2026 that makes that cycle of training and fixed ops seem so urgent as compared to other cycles? You mentioned, hey, when we hit an economic cycle like this is naturally happening. It seems more urgent today, Kim, than it has in the past decades.
Well, I think there's just so many options for where I want to take my car to get serviced.
Yeah. 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 And in your numbers, you show a lot of defection to independent repair facilities, and
Yeah.
it seems to hinge on customer experience. So as we wrap up, Kim, any other findings that you found you'd like to share as we wrap today?
One of the other interesting things I would just say is that, which I don't know how good of a job advisors are doing, or maybe they just don't have the experience or the tools to do it, is actually giving estimated completion times. When the estimated completion time was accurate, or even better than faster than what they gave to the customer, it really helped improve that customer satisfaction rating, that NPS score.
By the way, that's an age-old under promise, over deliver, right? So
Exactly. But it's a fine
that's
line, right?
yeah.
Because
Yeah, because it needs to be
if it's too
accurate.
long, I'm not going to get the work done.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Kim Saylor, Senior Director, Product Marketing, Fixed Operations at CDK. Thank you so much for joining the show. And, I'm going to keep talking the 9-minute wait time because it drives me nuts every time I hear it. So you're going to hear me talk this CDK stat all over the place. So Kim, appreciate you being on the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Sam.
All right, action-packed show. Let's go headlong into our next guest. And by the way, again, that 9-minute, it drives me. I wouldn't wait. I can't think of anything I'd wait 9 minutes for. Not an airline ticket, not anything else. Ben Saxton, General Manager of Inver Grove in Grove Heights, Minnesota. Welcome to the show.
We're in Inver Grove Heights, Minnesota.
Inver Grove. Sorry.
Inver Grove
I said it wrong. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks for being on the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
Tell us, for our audience, you're a first-time guest here. For the audience that doesn't know you, tell us who you are, where you are, which you told us, and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm in a suburb of St. Paul, Minnesota. I'm the general manager and one of the owners of the dealership. We have 3 stores. We have 2 Ford stores and a Hyundai store that's across the street from us here. We've been in the auto business, the Ford business, for 90 years. And our phone calls and wait times are not 9 minutes. I think it's less.
How long are they?
Maybe 15 seconds.
Okay. And how did you achieve that? I want to pull that thread because I'm astonished at 9. I can't stand it.
I couldn't believe it. My mouth almost hit the ground. The thing and stuff we talked about earlier is, though I'm a little bit younger, I was taught at an early age, people just want to be taken care of. They want to have a trustworthy advisor, as Kim was saying. And it has to be easy. So we have enough people in our BDC answering the phones, call, text, email, chat, social media, whatever. And our advisor's main job here, I know we weren't going down this path, but we are. Their job is to work with the customer that's in the service department. And, I love every part of the dealership, but just taking care of people and making it easy is important. And the 9 minutes just blew me away. Yeah.
So and how do you free up that advisor from it's the BDC, right? Are you using any technology to enhance or supplement that, or is it purely BDC that gets
so all the calls for the dealership, everything goes right through the BDC. They're both sales and service BDC, which I know is kind of unheard of. But I have this belief, I'm 34 years old. If I'm calling someone, I've already done my research. I've already tried to find the answer. So just answer the call, text, or email and help me out. Make it easy. If you make it hard, I'm going somewhere else.
Yeah. So you talk about that. You've spent a lot of time looking at the tools and dashboards, and you said in your intake and other places, there's just too many data points. There's too much dashboards, too many systems. What was the moment you realized that complexity, to your point, was hurting performance at your store and in automotive in general?
So actually, I would say it starts with, I'm at a Ford store. Ford has a lot of good dashboards. They have a lot of different data points that they want us to focus on. And from the dealer and dealer council, I want to say it was maybe a year ago, maybe a little less than a year, they came out with this dealer hub, which brings all these different data points and things we're supposed to focus on one website for us. We had a general manager of 25 years here who retired, and I started, doing my job and looking at things and realizing we're looking at, there's just too many things we're looking at, and we're not driving what we need to drive.
Yeah. So you reduced that. What are the only numbers you track now?
So we have, I don't know if Alan Mullally was the person who did this, but we do like business performance review on twice a week, and we track, units sold, PVR, new and used, F&I, aftermarket, total gross, and then we look at on the service side those same more simple points at a higher level of gross in the different shops, quick lane, repair shop, parts, recon, PEI, and CX and NPS. So those are probably the highest level things. And then, service will have certain dashboards or tools they use. Sales will have theirs. I'm working to just keep chopping down those walls so we can just look at everything together and drive.
So used cars is an area where service and sales collaborate, as they do on many.
Yep.
And you mentioned inventory turn. What's your target on inventory turn?
Well, we're not where I want to be. We have some generational changeover that's happening in the coming years. I don't have the exact number because I'm still poking around to decide what I think is good enough.
Yeah. Where do you think most dealers today in 2026 are leaving the most money on the table in used inventory management?
I think historically people focus only on gross, like, as the recon department and used cars are separated. And we, in our 20 group, this is where a great conversation has been had about, should they be directly connected by pay? Do they pay for them, and how does that work? But I just think, the difference in beliefs is I believe I can go on Google, I can go on any AI and go find me an F-150 with 50,000 miles with this plan. So I just want us to be, real with what the deals are. A vehicle's a vehicle. Do the best you can. Recon it as new as you can, and let's find a home for it.
Yeah. So in the green room before you came on, we were talking about, AI is the buzzword in all of automotive. We talked a little bit about that in the very beginning. I think there was a moment months ago where there were some vets in the industry that would say, hey, AI seems to be doing so much. There's going to be these young gals that come into the industry and they just turn everything over to AI. And you basically have a few people in the store and AI will just do everything else. Mm-hmm. You said, wait, I'm a younger GM. I'm getting in, figuring all this stuff out. And that's just not so. Talk to us a little bit about your take on technology and how blocking and tackling in automotive March 2026 is so crucial, even with all the advancements.
So I think with the generational turnover, meaning really I have managers that are 60 plus, and they're starting to look at their next phase in life. And I believe, based on what Kim said, making things easy. So I'm 34, I'm more millennial. It's not that we don't want to spend money at certain businesses or certain organizations. We have to build the trust first, because people have been taught a lot of different things. But I try to take a step back as a newer GM and owner and look at just the basics and say, okay, are we doing the basics really, really, really well, which is not a sexy thing to talk about or not too exciting, I look at AI and all of our tools as something that just helps everyone.
Yeah.
And so,
and I think you're 100% right. The basics are just they're not easy, but they're simple. And sometimes we make this business so doggone hard, and it results in a 9-minute wait time in service.
Not here. Same day, next day, however you want it.
Yeah. I love it. Would love to have you actually hang out for just a minute. I'm going to bring Mike Minerva back in for just a little bit of a lightning round as we wrap up. It's become a tradition in the last few minutes of every show. So thanks for your perspective on all things tech stack and service weight, and your thinking as a young GM about how you're going to win in 2026. Mike, are you there?
Yes, I am.
All right. So everybody knows kind of this roundtable. We just kind of summarize some of the topics we've talked about. Mike, does the 9-minute wait time quoted by CDK, is that part of what's causing the need for brokers, or at least the interest in brokers?
Yeah. I mean, is the reason people are interested in working with a broker. You're dealing with one person from start to finish. And I meant to bring this up a little earlier. There's really only one auto group that I know of that does something similar to like brokering sense of giving that customer.
Who's that?
Ray Katina.
Okay. I don't know who that is. So let me ask you this though.
They're a big luxury group in New York and New Jersey. They're Mercedes, BMW, all luxury brands. No, they don't have any mid-level, low-level brands. All luxury.
You're focused on one element of the business. So you see somebody like Ben that has to look at service and sales and BDC and body shop and office. They've got to focus on all these different areas. And you're saying, hey, the complexity, you're making one area of it simple in an attempt to get more customers. Is that unfair? So my question for Ben here is, do brokers help the industry or do they hurt it?
So I think it depends, kind of as Mike said, based on the broker. We have a couple local brokers here. We're in Minnesota in the Twin Cities. We have a lot of one price stores. So that really takes out a lot of the brokers, because a lot of these groups, Ford or luxury groups, are one price. We have no problem working with a broker. I get
back on.
Sorry.
All right, you have no problem with. I think we're back on.
Yeah,
we're back on production. Okay. No, that's okay. All right. Hold, because that's a good point you're making here. I actually love it, because I have a great counter question for Mike here on this. Yeah. Hey, everybody, a little bit of a technical difficulty. It's fun because we're talking about technical difficulties, glitches and whatnot. But I'm going to come back to you, Ben. Are brokers helping or hurting the industry? You're talking about the implications of one price.
Yeah. So in our Twin Cities area, we have a lot of one price dealers. So for us, we have no problem working with a broker as long as, we're aligned. I think where the challenge is, at least in our marketplace, is we've had experience with some brokers that they paint us out to be these evil people, and we're just trying to follow the rules based on the manufacturer. And with the one price, at least in the Ford world in the Twin Cities, there's some really good prices out there and really good opportunities.
So Mike, does one price kill brokering? Is there nothing left for you to sell when you can't go to a dealer, bundle a bunch of deals together and get a cheaper price, make your cut, and still provide a good deal to a customer?
So I would say there's really not that many one price stores in our area. I mean, only one I know that does the one price thing around here would be like an AutoNation store. That's really
Do you broker with AutoNation?
No.
Yeah. So that is an interesting point, that the negotiating element creates the opportunity. All right, next up, Mike, I'm going to ask you this. Will AI eventually replace BDC? You have a BDC department in your organization, I think, right, Mike?
Yes.
Will AI eventually replace BDC by automating elements?
So a lot of dealers are using AI BDC agents now, and you don't even realize it, that you're talking to. You text, you put a lot of these dealers when you sell your trade-ins. and you don't even realize you're talking to a BDC, a AI sales agent. You just talk to a computer.
They're good enough.
Yeah. You don't even know.
All right. Do you do in the broker world? Do you sell used cars as well, or is it just new?
No, we don't do. The only thing we do with used cars is hand them off to either the dealer that wants it or wholesale it out to wholesale.
Okay. And you decide the used car to pass it off to based on who you probably sell the most new through, and who comes to you on that.
Who's going to pay the most closest MMR? That's who's getting the car.
Yeah. So last up question for you, Ben, is used cars the biggest profit opportunity in the next 3 to 5 years, or is it fixed ops from your perspective?
I think it's fixed ops. I think our advantage here is we can get people in, same day, next day for service. And the main reason is because we've spent a lot of time and money training young technicians, training the advisors, to build that trust and such. I think with the internet, with AI, right, I think you do the best you can on new and used vehicles, and from there it's just taking care of people. And so I think, I built the garage, we have the hoist, we have the technicians, and I think being able to take care of people on that side of the business is the most important. But yes, selling vehicles is also very important.
All right, Ben, a comment from online. Eager K says the sales of sale brokers are as good as long as they don't buy cars to sell to overseas customers. Overseas sales is what killing broker-dealer relationships, and dealers get in trouble for overseas sales, which I would assume, Mike, you would agree with that as well. You've got to follow the rules and make sure we don't run astray. Well, we've had a great show today. This was a great conversation. Appreciate both of you. Mike Minerva, general manager, partner of Capital Motor Cars, coming on with the broker perspective. Ben Saxon, general manager of Inver Grove Ford, coming on to share perspectives on all things new and used, fixed ops, all the areas of the department. Thank you both for being on Daily Dealer Live today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And by the way, the comments are still alight. I mean, this New York City brokers do sell new cars to overseas customers, especially to Russia and Belarus, which that's not legal, is it? Eager, you tell me. And then Kareem says we do not ship to overseas. So a little bit of a debate there. We're going to come off of that topic now. We wanted to provide the counterpoint. We've done it. And it proved to be a super interesting conversation for today. To our audience on this Wednesday, March 11th, we say thanks for watching Daily Dealer Live. We break down the biggest moves in the car business as they happen. Don't forget, we're here live every Monday, Wednesday, and we'll be back this Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern with Fixed Ops Friday. So if this is your world, hit like, hit subscribe, turn on those notifications so you never, ever miss a beat. And we'll see you next episode. Thanks for being here, everybody.